Malaysia. Good evening here in the United States. This is Eric Miscoll with EMS Now, and welcome to this edition of the Eric Miscoll Show. Topic of our conversation today is to be the EMS market in Southeast Asia. As always, I'd like to welcome Phil Stoughton, back down under, my co-host throughout the last few years doing these shows. So welcome home to Australia, Phil. So
thank you.
Let me just talk some context here. Again, like I said, the focus is to be on Southeast Asia, although these conversations always go a little more global than that. But so when we think of Southeast Asia, we think of the area that encompasses the area kind of south of China, east of India, and north of Australia, roughly. And it's interesting because I think this includes some very important countries to the global EMS industries. And primary among those are certainly Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, the Philippines, and Vietnam is certainly an emerging one now too. And while this has been a very important region for the global EMS industry for many decades, I remember how it began, and even a place that, Singapore back in the day was probably considered a low-cost destination. It certainly isn't these days. But that region was originally considered kind of as a low-cost region. And more recently, it's seen as an alternative to manufacturing in China. So to learn more about kind of current trends, challenges, and opportunities in this area, we've invited two guests who are located in that part of the world and familiar with the region. So our guests today are David Chan. He's the Senior Vice President of Supply Chain at PCI Private Ltd, EMS company based out of Singapore. And Mr. Case Engelen, who's the CEO of Titoma, which is Time to Market. And Case is located in Taipei, so technically not Southeast Asia, but he's familiar with the region and his operations kind of span the region. So gentlemen, welcome both of you. And as always, I'd like to allow each of you to introduce yourselves and your companies in a little more detail. And David, why don't I begin with you, sir?
Hi, thanks, Eric. This is David, and nice to meet all of you. So I'm currently in PCI, and PCI has been 20 over years old company based in Singapore, and our operations is actually in Batam, Indonesia. So recently, as recently as November, we are right now part of the global group called Celestica. Okay, we are already part of Celestica as of November last year. Okay, so with this so-called merger, we hope to be able to bring more value, okay, to our customers as well as to the market in general.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. I actually remember PCI because I used to live in the Silicon Valley, and I think it was actually founded out there in the Silicon Valley.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
That's correct, isn't it? So yeah. Case, let me turn to you. Why don't you give an introduction to yourself, please?
Thanks for having me again, Eric. Yeah, Case Engelen. I'm from Holland originally, but I've been in Taiwan and a little bit of China for the last 25 years. And Titoma does, the end-to-end design and manufacturing of electronics for our customers. And so we work with EMSs in Taiwan, in China still, and we're also working in Colombia these days.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, thank you and welcome both. Let me just start kind of in a general way, and then we can get into some of the multitude of issues that we know are kind of challenging the industry these days. But David, how would you, if we think about the EMS infrastructure within Southeast Asia, with the region of the world, how would you characterize that? Is it expanding? Do you see growth in that area? What are the trends in that respect?
Yeah, my thinking is that the geography as well as the makeup of the whole Southeast Asia, it is very, very suitable for EMS. Okay, because if you look at Singapore especially, right, even though over the years the cost has gone up, okay, and I would say big factories are no longer feasible in Singapore, but because of the fact that Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia, we are all very close by. Okay, so that continues to enable this industry to grow. Okay, harvesting all the different so-called strengths, okay, of the various country. So there is never a EMS here that only comprises so-called employees from one country. It is always a mix of employees from the region. Okay, and that diversity actually gave Southeast Asia a very strong advantage, I believe. Okay, because I've been based in China for 10 years. Okay, so China is more homogeneous, even though we have so-called management coming from all over the world. But Southeast Asia's unique advantage is in its diversity, and that diversity really gave us a very strong, I would say, and of course, coupled with the recent trade war and its tariffs, Southeast Asia has indeed benefited too, with some of the activities moving out of China. Okay, so yeah, that sums up my analysis. Okay.
Okay.
Southeast Asia.
Very good. Thank you. Case, see that region of the world for EMS?
Well, it's true that China is not making itself very popular these days, and a lot of our clients they're saying, well, I want to manufacture somewhere that is not China. But at the same time, the heart of the matter is that electronic components is China. The whole electronic supply chain for almost anything is in China. So to sidestep a bit of the risk and the country of origin problem, you want to be in Vietnam or somewhere in Southeast Asia, but not too far away from China, because all the components still need to come from there. And yeah, as we're seeing right now, components really are key in the electronics industry. So that's why, yeah, I count myself fortunate to have stayed in Taiwan all these years.
Yeah. Hey, I was interested, Case. When you look at the geopolitics around the world and the challenges of, Ukraine and Russia and different things that are going on, when people are shifting out of China, are they concerned about Taiwan and about that geopolitical relationship, or do they still see Taiwan as a secure place to have their supply chain based?
There may be some. I mean, there's some articles about it in the news, but on the other hand, the operation in Ukraine is not going all that well. So
Right.
I really hope that gives the Chinese pause about thinking it's a pushover and nobody will react to it. So I really think that is way in the future. And
yeah,
of course, every time there is something, there's some airplanes coming by or something. My mother calls me because she seen it on the news, but we've had that for 20 years, and
yeah,
I'm sort of insensitized to it.
yeah. And when people move from China, if it's mainly based on this idea of risk mitigation, where do you see as the least risky places for them to be moving to? Is it the traditional Asian tigers like Thailand and Malaysia, or is it elsewhere that people are seeing as safe bets in Asia?
I think Malaysia is strong. It really also depends on what size of a company you are. Like if you're Samsung, you can go to Vietnam or Indonesia and do a greenfield operation and build a factory to produce 1 million cell phones, and then have 20 companies follow you and set up shop right next door. We typically deal with smaller volumes, and then yeah, you cannot build all that infrastructure yourself. So you're much more tied to go where that infrastructure is available already. And the big issue with electronics is that one component will stop your line.
Yeah.
So you need to have a very complete infrastructure and have backup plans for everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's why everybody's moved from just in time to just in case. And when I say just in case, I don't mean Case Engelen, I mean just in case something goes wrong. Hey, David, where do you see the safe bets in Asia for moving supply chain out of China?
Yeah, I would think, I'm in agreement with Case. I think Malaysia is a very strong candidate. In fact, I've worked in Malaysia for like 5 years, traveling up from Singapore to Malaysia on a daily basis. You know, the state of Johor, is actually quite a place for many EMS there. You know, big EMS. Yeah, so I actually see that. But of course, one of the disadvantage in Malaysia is the population, because factories there right now uses operators from the rest of Southeast Asia, you know, Myanmar, so while the country's policies are very favorable for manufacturing, especially EMS, and has a very strong track record, not only in Johor but also in Penang. Labor is a problem, okay, over there. Yeah. But on the whole, because of the infrastructure plus the availability of the so-called sufficient supply chain, and it's also the proximity from Thailand and also of course from China, Malaysia I believe is a very strong candidate.
Yeah. And I guess, Eric, you're going to get onto labor as
well, we'll ask about, but let's start with the material supply chain. And David, I mean, that's what you're in charge of, supply chain there at PCI. So how do you characterize it currently? We were talking before the recording started, so maybe you can pick up with some of your comments there. And also, do you know, as you said, as Case said, the material supply chain seems to be mostly in China. So do you see any diversification of that occurring in the region?
Yeah, I think over time there will be diversification, but you have to know, right? Malaysia right now is already home to many of the semiconductor industry. You know, we've got many back-end operation and even some front-end being done in Malaysia. But of course, the size is still nowhere compared to Taiwan and China. Okay, but I believe over time, the Malaysian government knows that they have to play even bigger in the semiconductor industry. And I agree with you, even for us, majority of our components, especially even for some of the mechanical parts, are also coming from China because of their competitiveness. Okay, but over the next few years, the trend is towards moving more and more supply chain towards this region. But nobody can, I would say, take over the supply chain in China overnight. I think that's not going to be possible. Yeah, it's not going to be possible. Yeah.
Case, what's your opinion on this? You kind of stated at the beginning it hasn't been replaced, but do you see, as far as the diversification, and is there benefit for companies EMS in Southeast Asia due to the proximity? You know, we used to always hear of the China, you know, inside China deal, right? If you're a China manufacturer inside China, you know, it's easier to get components than if you're a manufacturer outside of China sometimes. How's that dynamic playing out?
Well, I think what's very important is the ability to react. One thing is we have very good relations with factories in China, and one in particular, and they are really good at getting their hands on components. But they also have their limits, and what you then have to look at is what are the alternatives? Are there straight replacements? Like are you gonna replace an STM32 with a GigaDevices 32, which are one-on-one, or do you need to find something that is a little bit different? Do you need a board re-layout? You have to react on it, and that is an interaction, a quick interaction with people on the ground who know what the situation is. So yeah, I think being able to do the design here and not in isolation in Alabama or something is very important. And so the whole Southeast Asia region benefits from that, being close, being in the same time zone.
Mhm.
You see a lot of redesign, Case? A lot of people taking that option?
Yeah. I mean, recently there was a survey, and 50-60% of people are redesigning, and sometimes it's just going from an SMT MCU to the DIP version of an MCU, and then it takes a bit more space, so you do have to relay out the board. And sometimes you have to design for 3 different Bluetooth solutions. We now really we start with what is available in the market, and then buy say 5K of that, and then start to design. Because starting design and then waiting a year and a half is before you can even prototype.
Yeah. So when people are coming to you with new designs, are they thinking of future disruption, and are they designing that, or are you encouraging them to, you know, have more alternate sources in their bill of materials than perhaps they did in the past?
Oh, definitely. That's one of the main discussions that we're having. It's also one of the big reasons people come to us, to be honest. Yeah, that's. I mean, without components, it gets hard.
Yeah.
David, how is that with at PCI, that same issue? How are you handling that?
Yeah, I think very similarly to what Case has described, our design teams are super busy during this period, super busy. Yeah, because we have to first, you know, because we are also not only in the pure EMS business, we also do so-called design for our customers, okay, in the Bluetooth and also in many telematics products. So redesigning different platforms is something that we've embarked, especially when we have, you know, shortage of major components like the NXP and so on and so forth. So these are the efforts that has happened, very unprecedented, you know. So the engineers are so busy sourcing for alternate components. You know, when we do spot buy, we also have to make sure that we have the availability. So the strategies will have to differ from customers to customers, products to products. Yeah, so very similar to what Case has described.
Yeah. Hey guys, whenever we talk about these component shortages, people are always asking us how long you think they're going to last. So it's an impossible question to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Before we move on to another topic, how long do you see this stress in the component supply chain lasting?
Yeah, well, you need to get everything right, and even for ICs. And of course, in the West, a lot of companies and a lot of countries are now saying, "Oh, we're going to invest billions in building fabs," but those take 3-4 years to ramp up. And then you need to be able to get your hands on the UV machines of ASML, which are in very short supply. Basically, they've all been booked up by TSMC. But it's even like if you're building an IC, you have the silicon that is mounted on a wire frame, and in between there's a substrate. And the substrate supplier says they're completely sold out until 2027.
Wow.
Oh. And one part of a component missing means the whole thing comes to a halt. So what I do think is, so in the high end, there's all these international, India, Japan, Europe, America, building fabs, but that's going to go very slow because of the time it takes to build in Germany and in the US. There was an interesting case where you could compare the time it takes for Elon Musk to build a super factory in the US, in Germany, and in China. And the one in China, of course, is pumping it out. because they don't need to worry about pesky environmental regulations and protesters and all that. There's none of that. So they buff that factory is done in I don't know, 9 months or so. Whereas in Germany and in the US, it takes a lot longer.
Yeah.
So it's going to take quite a while for that high-end part of the IC market to ramp up. But China, in the meantime, is really going after, I think, anything that they can get into the IC market, and so that's more going to be on the bottom end. And there they are already starting to take market share.
You agree with that, David?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, in a very similar way. But I see it as different stages, right? Because if you look at it, the high-end part of the IC, those better than 28 nanometer or 14 nanometer, lower than that, those are the ones that will take slightly longer. But the market is already starting to, I would say I have less problem, getting chips for 28 and above. But the high-end ones are the ones that we are watching very closely. Okay, and this is also an opportunity for Chinese OEMs actually, okay, to actually regain, so-called, get more market share. So I believe the Chinese, especially in the mid to low end, okay, they are definitely going to grab a lot of market share. In the past, I've got customers who is totally shut off from Chinese OEMs, electronic components. But nowadays, they say, grab whatever you can find, something that works, and they will just, verify very fast. So I would say that the high end will probably take 3 to 4 years to catch up with the so-called demand. But of course, that one is also dependent on the high-end so-called mobile market that uses most of those chips. But if you look at the EV markets, they don't really need the high-end, the high-end. They really need a mid to low end, because size is not a problem, So I believe the EV market will ease off faster because the capacity to build those chips are getting on faster than the high end, much faster. Okay, so it depends on which market you're referring to. Yeah.
Very good. Let me follow up, and David, you made mention of it with the labor force or the labor issues and the type of workers in the different factories, how it's more homogeneous in China and more diversified in other parts. But COVID also impacted that, had an impact on workforce issues around the world. And with manufacturing, with EMS work becoming a lot more, less labor intensive, right? More automated, and certainly the pandemic helped accelerate that trend as well. What are the challenges that you're seeing in getting the right types of workers? Because the type of work is become more higher level, more engineering type skills are required. How is that going, and are there challenges there?
Right. I would answer based on, if you look at based on the kind of products that you're referring to, because EMS industry, we have these two big categories, right? The high volume, low mix, and the high mix, low volume. So both of this kind of so-called segments requires different kind of manufacturing, DL, so-called chemical content. For the high mix, low volume, you require more technicians. For the high volume, low mix, you require more workers of a general skill. Okay, so depending on your segment of your market that you're serving most, will drive your need for the different levels of skill sets for the operators and the technicians. Okay, so like what I said, right? Different countries, even in Southeast Asia, we have different problems. But the good thing in Southeast Asia so far, like my factory, okay, in Indonesia, we've got engineers coming from Philippines. Okay, we've got technicians and engineers also coming from Malaysia. Okay, whereas Indonesia has got vast supply of very good operators. Okay, so that's the reason why, that's how we solve our labor issues. But of course, in terms of, and then we also have a common language, and that's English. Well, of course, similarly in China, they have got all kind of skill sets, okay, and they all speak Chinese. So that's also an advantage that they have. So it depends how, different EMS will, depending on whether you're in China, Malaysia, Thailand, or even Philippines, so we will have to solve our own problems in a very different, unique way.
Yeah. And so you find the universities in those countries are turning out sufficient engineering talent?
Yeah, sufficiently enough for at least in a base level for manufacturing. Okay, but even right now, we are also beginning to grow our design labs in Indonesia and Philippines, because we find that first of all, not only because of the cost is so-called is more attractive in those countries, but the skill sets of people, especially in the Philippines and Indonesia, they are very, very good. Okay, sufficient for us to kind of like park some of our so-called design force there.
Yeah. In Case, of course, you're sitting in a country that cranks out just a lot of good engineering talent.
Yeah. But there's a lot of competition recently. Microsoft and Google and a lot of big names have set up big labs here. So getting good people, good engineers is becoming a lot harder. And that is actually the reason that already like 6-7 years ago, we started a lab in Colombia, and we've been importing trainees from there, training them in Taiwan, and then they go back to Colombia and do the design center work there. And that is actually working out really well. And yeah, with COVID, the international movement of people has been severely restricted. And that is also something that factories here have been noticing. It's harder to get people to come in. Yeah, the COVID restrictions in China are really fierce at the moment. So labor is a big constraint. It's not. I think it's not cost as much like in our segment. Like that we were saying, if we do a lot of high mix, lower volume, and then getting it all set up is more where the work is. It's not so much the 7 screws that need to be tightened to get it done. So direct labor is not so much of a cost factor. It's just, can you get it, and can you get qualified people to do the line setup and the testing and the troubleshooting. And it has been getting harder, certainly also in Taiwan with the COVID restrictions, I have to admit.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And Case, you mentioned the lockdowns and restrictions in China. How much impact are you seeing from that? I mean, that's obviously exacerbating the supply chain issues, but is that also exacerbating the talent shortages they have on the mainland?
Well, a lot of factories around the Shanghai area, of course, are completely locked down. In Shenzhen, things are, basically back to normal. But moving stuff in and out of the country, that is the biggest bottleneck right now. So if you need to get components from outside in, there's like a 20-week delay or so. And that is actually only stimulating people there to source locally as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. You touch on an interesting issue, the whole logistics one. I was going to come to it. So since you served it up, let's jump on it now. How is that? I mean, and other than just, and I'm aware of what was happening in China here, but how is that evolving? you know, we've heard due to the pandemic, there was a lot of issues. Within Southeast Asia, is it easier to get the parts around than it would be to ship them to Europe or North America, or how do you see that evolving? David, how about you? How do you think about that?
Well, in terms of logistics right now, you know, we all know it's a very, very big bottleneck right now, you know. So I'm not seeing any let off right now, because even goods going out of Singapore is a problem, you know, to the US, to Europe. It's a big problem. We've got customers having goods stuck here because they're trying to book a container, you know, get our containers to even ship to the US. So that is a problem. Okay. Now I agree. China side, the Shanghai did hurt us a little bit. Good thing we reacted fast when we heard about it. We grabbed whatever components we have, get them to ship their finished goods way ahead of time. So we weren't that badly hit, but we are still hit. Okay, because you just cannot have enough inventory, buffer inventory to cater to a 2 months shutdown. That's not possible. Yeah, so I think going forward with COVID as well as this Ukraine war, I'm actually seeing even some fallout. You know, Russian planes not allowed to execute, right? So there are components coming from Europe stuck in the plane that is you know, that is registered to a Russian owner. Even that causes a problem, you know. Yeah, so I don't see this letting up. Probably it will only get back to normal in 1 to 2 years time. Yeah, so
yeah, it's the other part of the supply chain problem, isn't it? The logistics, and it's ongoing, and it's one disruption after another. Every time you think one has passed, another one shows up.
That's right. That's right. We just, you know, just like last couple of years, right? China got out of it very fast, and then Malaysia was hit, and then Thailand was hit. No, we were like, wow, every other quarter we were hit almost by every one of this single region, and because of the fact that our you know, for you know, the whole manufacturing, the whole electronic supply chain and value chain is so globalized. You know, that every single, once we have one region hit, it almost hit every part of the industry. Yeah, but because nobody designs a component, a product that doesn't come from all over the world. You know, yeah, it's like if you do a fab in America, but your back end is in Philippines. You know, your back end could be in Malaysia. If it's Malaysia is hurt, you are hurt. You know,
yeah.
So they all take.
Are we stuck with those long global supply chains?
Sorry?
But I'm just like, I hear there's also quite a shortage of PCB in the US and bare PCB, and that is just because of the lead times of getting it over from China. And trying to orchestrate high mix short runs in the US, where you need to get all the different components to come from all over the world into one location and be there all at the same time. It must be a complete nightmare. And so yeah, again, I count myself very lucky to be here, where there is 17 PCB suppliers we can work with if needed. So that makes quite a difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, just I know we got several minutes left, so I want to just kind of kick on a few issues. One is I'm often curious about how India is being perceived in Southeast Asia within the industry as a potential competitive environment. And there's a lot of, you know, after 20 some years of hope and hype, you know, India seems to be finally kind of, you know, realizing the potential that it has within the EMS industry. And are certainly making some investments, even on the component side, to kind of to do with that. What is your perception of India at this particular time? Case, you were nodding your head. What were you thinking there?
Yeah, well, there's really a lot of smart engineers in India, and engineers from India are leading, I don't know what it is, 25% of the Fortune 100. So there is a lot of potential there. It's just coming along slow, and there seems red tape is still a big issue. Different factions fighting each other within factories because one is from one region and one to the other. There is yeah, and there is a lot of local stuff that makes it harder to get stuff done there, from what I hear from different sides.
David, do you have an opinion on India?
Yeah, coming from, an experience in Southeast Asia as well as China, India is definitely up and coming, but they will take longer than how China has taken, or even Southeast Asia. If you take a look, Southeast Asia actually took longer time than China, okay, to ramp up the EMS industry. China took a phenomenally short period, okay, to ramp up their share of the market. And one of the strong reasons, because not only in terms of language that they are homogeneous, okay, the culture is also pretty homogeneous. Now, actually, China is a region, comprises of many, or rather, China is a continent, comprises many regions of different background. But the amazing part is that you can run a factory in Shanghai, okay, which I did for almost 10 years. But the components of your labor force comes from all over the country with very, very diverse background. Okay, very, very different background, even though they're all Chinese. Okay, but you try and do that in India, you may have a problem. Okay, that's my feeling. Okay, not only because of the cultural diversity, okay, but probably their tolerance between the various regions are not as I would say good compared to the Chinese, okay, who is more cohesive. And on top of that, you have a language problem, okay, because the country speaks so many languages. Okay, I mean, just imagine in China, you only got to worry about English and Chinese, but in India, you have to worry about a lot more than just English. Yeah. So your work instructions, your training, everything that so if you want a super big factory there, it will be a challenge. Yeah. So they are up and coming for sure, but it will take a longer period of time. Yeah. And coupled with the fact that the components, right? Because if you don't have investment in the supply chain, nobody wants to go in big time because everybody is waiting for each other. Because so the big guys got to go in first, right? But the big guys goes in means he has to pay so much freight cost of components from China, or Taiwan or Southeast Asia. That may not make economic sense in the short term. So it's really a chicken and egg thing. Yeah. So until they get the act together, the EMS industry will not, I would say, accelerate at such a pace like what he has done in Southeast Asia and China.
Yeah, I think the one similarity they do have is they have a huge population and hence a very large consumer market. So India for India is quite a different proposition to the India as the factory of the world option as well. And Eric, absolutely. I think that brings us on to the the idea of region for region and some of the regionalization trends we're seeing at the moment. I know that's a topic you wanted to cover.
Yeah.
Case, are you seeing more people thinking more regionally about their supply chain rather than focusing around one particular geography?
Well, I think that the imports of electronics after Trump put the tariffs on China, since then the electronics imports to the US have gone up by like 60% or so. So it's they are very dependent, and I think it's a lot easier for China to not use the rest of the world than it is for the rest of the world to not use China, because of their humongous massive factory coupled with their internal markets. So you are seeing a lot of local substitution in China, and I think that America is shooting itself in the foot by going for a bifurcation. I really think that efficient production. To me, it doesn't make sense to, for example, create a high-end IC industry in Texas and in Germany and in Japan and in Malaysia and in India and in Taiwan and in Korea. There just are not that many PhDs to babysit all those machines. So trying to recreate all that in 17 different locations, I think it's very inefficient, and all these government-sponsored, they will be not competitive. They will be not cost competitive, I'm afraid, and they are quite likely to die out. I mean, 2 years ago, everybody said that the facial mask industry was highly strategic and everybody should do it locally. And so in the US, quite a few factories jumped on the occasion and started producing them. And now you see them all complaining, well, everybody said it was really important, but now they just buy whatever is the most cost effective. And all these factories in the US have nothing to do anymore. And a lot of people say it's really strategically important that we buy locally, but nobody wants to pay for it. That's the truth.
Yeah. David, how do you see that?
Yeah, definitely. I also don't see the point of duplicating, especially the high-end wafer fab in so many regions. I myself have worked a couple of years in in my previous job. In fact, I was in HP for 12 years. The wafer fab talent, okay, is not easily available, and it takes a long time to actually develop the skill sets of engineers. I mean, I was an electronic engineer, and if you want to work in the wafer fab, the training is different from if you want to work in in a box built factory, for example. Completely different wafer fab. So if you want to duplicate so many of this so-called high-end fabs in so many regions at the same time, it's going to be a problem. Highly inefficient, and also, by the way, by the time all these markets are already so-called, all the fabs are being set up, even if you can do it, I don't think you have that big a market to to actually absorb the capacity. So we may face a different problem 4 to 5 years down the road, where there's so much capacity and everybody's going to cut the pricing, and then we will have another crisis, in the making.
Yeah.
So
To me, it's a good crisis. But
yeah, it's a good crisis for guys like us. We've got more choice. It's a buyer's market now. It's a seller's market, right? Case. Yeah.
Listen, we're going to come to an end here, and I usually end with a forward-looking question, but since we touched on that already, I want to, my training and my background is in psychology, so I always think to the human side of business, which to me is always the most confounding part anyway. I spoke to a gentleman recently, and the term he used was that of supply chain fatigue. This strain that these years are putting on the people who are working it, right? And are out there in the companies, whether it's in EMS and OEM, various supply chain. So I guess I just want to ask, in conclusion here, how do you assess the people holding up in the industry, how the industry is supporting people during these very, very challenging, difficult times? And Case, maybe I'll ask you first.
Yeah, well, it's true that our sourcing guys are working like they've never done before, but we hired extra people, of course, and But in a sense, I think they get more recognition because they are really valued, and actually good component sourcing now becomes your USP, your selling point of a company. And so I think in that sense, they actually have become more prominent in the company, and it's a good thing for them, even though the hours are long.
David, how is it at PCI?
Yeah, exactly right. They get recognized in the company, they know their importance, but at the same time, they are more marketable, so to speak, right? So,
Yeah.
so at the end of the day, we have, I wouldn't say we have problems retaining our staff, but because no matter what, this accelerates their marketability, and attrition gets higher. In fact, right now, I would say my supply chain team, right now comprises of people from China, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore. So in the past, we used to be very much Singapore-centric. People will come here and work. But right now, I just have no choice but to hire people. And due to COVID, right, I say, hey, you can work from home. And all of us for the past 2 years has been working from home. And today we are still working from home because we hire those staff like a Penang guy, someone from KL, and someone from the Philippines, someone from China, and we all speak on a daily basis, multiple regions at the same time, solving a single problem. So yeah, so I believe this is in fact, COVID, as well as the so-called the recognition of supply chain folks, which is very good. Okay, it has upgraded the industry, but it also have kind of like move us into a different operating model, and probably we are the ones who will stay in this model for a long time. I think gone are the days where we all quickly go to we are all house almost 70 to 80% of us in the same building and meeting up together. But nowadays, within 5 minutes, we have to call. We have to Zoom and solve a problem, multi-country based, multi-regions, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So that's the trend. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting that you're moving to a new operating system, and I hear that quite a lot, that people are redesigning their supply chains for the small disruptive environment we find ourselves in. I think it's great that the supply chain guys are now the rock stars of the business, and that you have to take suitable care of them, because they've been doing an awesome job for a long time. So yeah, look after those people.
Certainly.
Good. Well, gentlemen, thank you for your time today. Thank you for agreeing to come on, share your insights. I know our audience will appreciate them. And I wish you stay safe, and I wish you continued success, and hopefully we can catch up again sometime.